Hi, and welcome to Axelbank Reports History and Today, conversations with America's top nonfiction authors and why their books matter right now. I'm Evan Axelbank, and today we're going to speak with Charles Ferguson, the author of Presidential Seclusion, The Power of Camp David. This is his first book, and he was the Camp David historian and presidential chaplain. He's also written for the Presbyterian Outlook. Mr. Ferguson, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Evan.
Before we start our interview, I want to invite listeners to our Patreon page to ask for your support in keeping the show going. Go to patreon.com/AxelbankHistory. We will donate part of your contributions to a charity for children's literacy. When it comes to the White House, millions of people have been there. Maybe not necessarily into the president's bedroom, but you don't have to be a head of state to have been in the East Room or gotten a behind-the-scenes tour of the Oval Office. Even if you haven't been to the White House, there are so many books and so many pictures about it that it's not too hard to imagine what it is like to be there. But how many people have been to Camp David? As Charles Ferguson writes, only people in the most select groups get to go. High-ranking military, a top advisor, a cabinet member, a head of another state, or in Charles's case, a chaplain and historian. So Charles, describe how in the world you wound up with a day job at Camp David.
Uh, Completely by accident. I was serving as a chaplain in Singapore, and becoming the chaplain at Camp David is obviously a job you don't ask for. Out of the blue, I received an email inviting me to, or just tell me I had been nominated and inviting me to finish the application and just to see how that process would work out. I filled out all the paperwork, was lucky enough to be invited to Camp David for an interview. Uh, did the interview. A couple days later, found out I was selected, and then underwent the lengthy security clearance process to uh, fulfill that job interview. And then I made my way up to Camp David and spent 3.5 years there as the chaplain to the president and also the historian for Camp David.
And when was this? Which administration was this for? And what do you think was on your resume that made them notice you?
I served both the Trump 1.0 and the Biden administration. I did about 3 years with President Trump's administration and 6 months with President Biden's. And as for what was on the resume, I think it's just you do your job well, someone notices it and nominates you. I think my line officer submarine background may have had a little something to do with that as well, just because knowing I could handle the stress of whatever situation I might find myself in, and having that background in the submarine force obviously didn't hurt as well.
Just real quick, axelbankhistory.com is designed by Nikki Rideout of Ellie Claire Designs. It has our most recent episodes, it has featured episodes, and also a link to that Patreon page. So check out Nikki's work. All right, you mentioned you just kind of went up to Camp David. Explain what it's like to get there. I can't imagine that there are multiple signs and other directions urging people to go check it out.
There's no signs directing you how to get there. Though if you check Google Maps, you can find it.
Oh,
It's on
really?
Google Maps. You go up. Obviously, you get your invitation either through being invited to work up there and going through that process, or the president invites you to come up as a friend of the president or someone that the president would like to talk with. You clear security, and I like to describe it as once you clear security and go through the gate, it's almost like going into the Shire in Tolkien's work. The worries of the world fall away. It's this magical place where I talk about it in the book, The Spirit of Camp David, that was coined by Nikita Khrushchev. And it truly is. There's this spirit there of calmness, of peace, the tranquility. During the summer, the walking trails are completely shaded by the thick foliage and really cools it off compared to the rest of the hot, humid Maryland summers. And it being on top of a mountain helps keep it cool as well. Though the flip side, in the winter, it's this biting cold wind that comes ripping through when all the leaves are gone off the trees. It's just this overwhelming sense of peace and the seclusion and the secrecy, the privacy, combined with that peaceful feeling, sets the stage for Camp David to host amazing events and world-changing decisions up there.
The way that you put it in the book is that the mountain and spirit are so interwoven with the first family that it's hard to tell where one ends and where the other begins. Why do you think that presidents need a place that the public is not invited to?
That's just a human need. You and I, we can go vacation wherever we want without throngs of people following us and the glare of the press, whereas the president just doesn't get that no matter where they go. A lot of times, even if they go to their personal property, the press just hounds them and follows them there. Where Camp David is the one place where there is no press. The only people that are up there are people that are specifically invited by the president or have been hand selected to work up there, knowing that the people that are working up there aren't going to talk about it. And so it's that one place where they can be themselves around their friends and family and also with other world leaders to do work if that's what they choose to use it for. And I think that's the magic of the place because it gives them a sense of normalcy where nothing else about the office of the president feels normal if you're looking at it from the outside. Obviously, I've never been inside the office of the presidency elected that way. So I can just tell from the outside, I think every human needs this respite from the pressure of the world.
I've been to Harry Truman's little White House in Key West. I've seen some other presidential type retreats. I've heard stories about Abraham Lincoln's getaway in, I think it's in Virginia, although it might be Maryland. But either way, there's grounds where Abraham Lincoln went during the summer, at least for one summer. What other pre-Camp David presidential retreats were there?
Well, you mentioned Lincoln. One of the places that he used to go was in the DC area, the Petworth neighborhood, the old soldiers' home. He
Yeah,
would
that's what it is.
there
Yeah,
frequently,
yeah.
and that's still in the DC. Well, yeah, it's still in the DC bounds of the city. Hoover went to a place called Rapidan and actually offered that up as a site for Roosevelt, but obviously political reasons, Roosevelt's not going to take his predecessor's gift. Um, but a lot of them just went to their own personal homes if they had those around the area, and if they weren't close by, they would do what Lincoln did and go to the old soldiers' home because it had an elevation of 200 feet. And you don't think that's a lot, but in DC in the 1800s, it was built on a swamp. It's hot, it's humid. August is oppressive, and just that little elevation gave enough relief for Lincoln that it wasn't as bad. But most presidents have just tried to get out of DC during the summer because of the heat and humidity. And thanks to Roosevelt, there's this nice mountain retreat where they can go and be an elevation of 1,600 feet and not and get that cool breeze. And it's about 10 degrees cooler on the mountain than it is down in DC on any given day in the summer.
Yeah, and so describe how and why FDR needed and had built a presidential retreat for him. From what I understand, Harold Ickes was a big part of it.
Harold Ickes was a big part of it because he was involved as Secretary of the Interior and was charged with helping find all the land. But it was a combination of events that really necessitated Roosevelt trying to find a place close to DC to escape and have a retreat. Roosevelt would normally, before the war, would go up to Hyde Park to his home or down to Warm Springs because he had found that the literal warm springs in Georgia were good and soothing for his polio. But as the war started, Roosevelt was rationing fuel and all of the commodities that people would use day to day. And so he was trying to stay closer and would try to go out on the USS Potomac, his presidential yacht, and would tool around in the Chesapeake Bay, maybe go up and down the east coast of the US. But after we declared war on Japan, Germany got involved, and immediately after Germany got involved in the war, their U-boats started coming off the east coast of the US and were attacking Allied shipping. So close that from Long Island, you could see the hulks of burning cargo ships from Long Island and New York City. Roosevelt's advisors were worried at that point that taking the yacht up and down the Atlantic or even inside the Chesapeake was too risky because he might get sunk by a lucky U-boat captain. And then we lose the president, the leader, one of the leaders of the war effort, by chance. And so or FDR's advisors suggested finding a place close by where the president could have that retreat and get away. And so Harold Ickes and his team started going around looking at places within about a 3 hour drive of Washington, D.C., because they were rationing fuel and they didn't want to drive too far away just for the political blowback that would cause in the middle of the war. And the team narrowed down to 3 or 4 different sites, and they took Roosevelt specifically up to the top of Catoctin Mountain, and it was originally called Camp High Catoctin Number 3. It was supposed to be a boys' camp, but the federal government had taken it over and was using it for federal employees to go and camp during the summer. Roosevelt steps out of the car, looks around, and said, "This is a Shangri-La." And for him, that was high praise uh, because he was a fan of the James Hilton work, Lost Horizon, which was the first ever paperback that was sold in the US. It was, I tell everybody, it was like the Harry Potter of the day. Everybody had read the book and knew what it was. So when he quoted that, people realized that this was going to be the place where Roosevelt was going to spend his time.
Describe what actually is at Camp David now. How many buildings are there? What are in the buildings? And what other facilities are there for the president?
I won't tell exactly how many buildings are there, but
Yeah.
there's the facilities that are there for the president. There's sleeping cabins. So there's the president's cabin,
Now, when we
which is,
say cabin, I mean we're not talking like Woods cabin here. I mean these are glamping cabins.
oh, they're definitely glamping cabins. It's
Okay.
5-star accommodations inside. But from the outside, they look like those woods cabins. Like if you were to go to a summer camp, you would feel very familiar in your surroundings just looking at the outside. But when you get and a lot of the buildings are still the original cabins and the original siding from when uh, then Camp High Catoctin Number 3 was built in 1936. So and converted in 1942 for Roosevelt. Aspen, which is the president's cabin, it's the largest one. They took
Now, how
three.
large are we talking here? I mean, is it like massive? Is it a
It's
few
a
thousand
modest
square
size
feet?
in today's what people would what a moderate size home. Um, it's a I think 3 bedrooms, so
Uh-huh.
it's got a nice patio porch overlooks the countryside. But that was the largest cabin because they took 3 of the original cabins and combined them into one. And they've built a number of other cabins for guest cabins for people to sleep in there over the years. There's another large cabin called Laurel Lodge, which is the president's dining, conference, hosting facility. There's a presidential office in there. It's got a huge kind of living room den with a fireplace. Again, it overlooks um, into the woods, and you're just surrounded by woods the whole time. There's a building that has a movie theater and a game room in it, so you can watch movies, play video games, air hockey, whatever you'd like to do. There's the landing zone for the helicopters, which also can double as the skeet range, archery range. There's a pool. It's about a 25-meter pool that the staff can use or anybody else can use attached to a gym, a very state-of-the-art gym. The president's cabin has its own pool that they can use as they see fit fully heated, can be used in the middle of winter. That was built during the Nixon administration. And in the kind of field valley behind the president's cabin, there's a four-hole chip and putt that was put in during Eisenhower's time. It's between 80 to 140 yards, and you just move from tee box to tee box, and you can do 18 holes, but it's mostly just there to um, work on your short game. And
Sounds like this
so
sounds like an ideal place, I got to tell you.
it is. It is. It's an ideal place. It's good for work because there's a full, the office of the president can completely relocate up there and without missing a beat. But it also has everything you need to do to relax with friends or family or other world leaders. And when the world leaders come up, they participate in all of those recreational activities as well. During H.W. Bush's time, there are photos throughout the archives at the library of George H.W. Bush playing horseshoes with all these world leaders up at Camp David because that was his outdoor thing that he would do.
Now, how much of this have you seen, based on your job, your day job as the chaplain and historian there? Have you seen everything from Aspen Lodge to the pools to the gym and the communication centers?
Oh, absolutely. I've been through all of it. You have even the people that come up and visit, they have the ability to see all of the guest cabins as well. And if you get invited in, you get invited into the different cabins. It's You have the freedom just to walk around and see everything. There's even some barracks and a dining facility for the military people that work
Mhm.
there to stay or eat as they need to.
On a daily basis, just when the president was there, did you meet the president, either Presidents Trump and Biden, and did you have dealings with them?
I did get to meet both of them and have conversations with them. I can't talk about those conversations, but can tell you that I have met both of them and wonderful people that warm and engaging, both of them, and were just a pleasure to get to know and talk to.
When it comes to the ability for the president to run the country from there, I assume no expense is spared, and they are able to communicate and do everything they need to do in order to know what's going on if they want to break away from their vacation.
Absolutely, just like on Air Force One, the idea is it's the continuity of government. The president will have a full connectivity wherever he is in the world, Camp David included, Air Force One. Um, the president is always reachable, which is one of the reasons that Camp David is so important, is because you never get away from the job. It's with you. The office of the president follows the individual wherever they go, 24/7. It's not something you can get away from. It's The president doesn't get to take vacation and just leave work behind like the rest of us get to do. And because it's always with them, Camp David is that place where they can get a bit of relaxation in the middle of it.
If you hear me typing here, it's because I'm calling up the list of how many times each president had been to Camp David. And I think it's a really interesting list because some of them really loved it and were there quite a bit. And maybe it's a little bit revealing as to what type of president it was. And some presidents were there not very often at all. So let's just talk about that a little bit. It looks like Ronald Reagan is sort of the world leader in this category, 189 visits to Camp David versus Harry Truman was in office the same amount of time and was only there 10 times. What do you think the number of visits reveals either about the president or about the time they were governing in?
I've tried to look around and see if there was some common theme in the number of visits and the personality of the president. And I tried to, I really couldn't nail down exactly some kind of correlation between it all. Because it's all very individual. Harry Truman did not like Camp David. And I think it's a miracle and a testament to the power of Camp David that it's still there. He visited 10 times in
Right. It
his
was
eight
new at the
years.
point then, right? Yeah, it was new. Yeah.
It was new, and he didn't even know about it until after he assumed the presidency. And the first visit he
He didn't know
had,
about the nuclear bomb either, so
correct.
right, right.
Roosevelt kept a lot of secrets from his vice
Yeah,
president.
yeah. But go ahead. Sorry.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, he got up there and felt claustrophobic. He's a Missouri boy, wanted wide open spaces, and the staff at then what was called Shangri-La looked around and said, "Hey, we know you're not really happy here. Is there something we can do?" And Truman mentioned that he felt like he needed more open space. So they actually cut all the trees away from around the president's cabin, which was called Bear's Den at that time, created the field that's in the back, and then actually cut a notch in the trees in the distance so that President Truman could look out and see, as far as he could. And even that never really made him want to come up very often because, like you said, he preferred Key West. And that was more to his liking and what he wanted. So he would go down to Key West. Um, you mentioned Reagan. I I think the reason Reagan came all the time was because his home and his ranch were in California, and it just would look horrible for him to fly across country every weekend to escape DC. So he used that more than others. Um, Even George H.W. Bush, he used it 124 times in 4 years. He would have blown through the record
Right, right.
had he been reelected. And I think for him, it was something similar in that he owned a home up in Kennebunkport, but decided to stay close just because of uh, the optic of him always going back and forth. Um, Even though Kennebunkport was fairly close, he decided to stay even closer when he escaped because Kennedy built a place in Northern Virginia. Uh, they had rented a place called Glen Ora and lost the lease, and that spurred him to start coming to Camp David more often. He visited once in his first year, and then in the remaining 18 months of his presidency, visited on average once a month. Um, and he had a place close by, but then started to use it more often. So it, I don't know if it's necessarily the personality of the president, more the circumstances of their presidency that drives them to or from either of those. And the recent examples we've had from uh, Clinton, Obama, Trump, and Biden, they didn't use it as frequently as others, but they're the normal. The the use rates that are really high, such as Nixon and the Bushes and the Reagans, are abnormal compared to what most other presidents have used it.
Yeah, the only four presidents to hit triple digits are Nixon, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and who am I missing there? Bush, Reagan, and Nixon. Is there a party thing going on there? All four of them are Republicans, although Carter was at 99 and certainly would have passed that if he'd had another term.
I don't think it's a party thing. Carter obviously would have, hit well over 100 had he been reelected. And Carter was the most consistent. He visited 47 of his 48 months that he was in office, which so he consistently visited. Clinton had 60, so he was up there as well in his 8 years. Um, I
It
don't
must
think that there's a party line. I just think it's just the circumstances of that president and how they viewed where they wanted to go, or if their home was a little farther away. Because Carter, his home was down in Georgia, so it made sense for him to stay up at Camp David more often as well.
It must have been interesting for President Biden to be there as president as opposed to as vice president. I'm sure he'd been there numerous times, either as a senator or foreign relations committee, and then as vice president. Was it interesting for him? Did it feel different for him to be there as the commander in chief?
I don't know. He's never written about his presidency yet, so I think we'd have to wait to see for that book to come out and if it was something that even crossed his mind. I do. Uh, George H.W. Bush is the closest example. And he talks about how he didn't really get to go up there very often as vice president. It was in the second term that he was able to start going up there as the vice president, just to do some work. And I want to say the first time H.W. Bush went up there was he was invited up by Nixon to take the job as the head of the Republican National Committee, was interviewed up at Camp David with Nixon. And so a lot of the presidents that have been vice presidents don't really talk much about their time as vice president. I think because it's overshadowed by their time in the presidency. Nixon didn't talk much about how often he used Camp David as Eisenhower's vice president, though he did mention he came up to work on a campaign speech in 1960, before that election that he lost. So it'll be interesting to see, if President Biden does eventually write a memoir or put a book out, what his thoughts on the transition and the difference is between being vice president and president.
Every once in a while, work has a way of intruding on your vacation, especially for a president. What are some times, going back to the beginning, that presidents use Camp David specifically to conduct business? They went there because it would be a better place to conduct business than it would have been to conduct it in the White House.
There are a number of those examples. The first and earliest example of just specifically coming up for work, I would say, would be Eisenhower. After his heart attack, his first cabinet meeting of his presidency was at Camp David. He was recovering at his home in Gettysburg, had the cabinet come and visit Camp David and met them there. And that was kind of a theme for Eisenhower. He would do most of his personal relaxation and vacation time at the farm in Gettysburg, but then do work up at Camp David. And that worked well because it's a quick uh, helicopter flight or drive up, depending on the time in his presidency. Because the first helicopter ride for a president was in 1957, and that was Eisenhower that did that. Nixon used it a lot for work. Um, he famously took us off the gold standard from Camp David in 1971. And he also reshaped the administration after his reelection from Camp David. Spent weeks up there in November, um, just bringing people up, interviewing them, firing them, reassigning them. And then both Nixon and Eisenhower brought up world leaders, Soviet premiers, specifically to Camp David to show off their kind of country estate. And then obviously the biggest event that occurred at Camp David was Carter bringing up Sadat and Begin for the Camp David Accords. So they were up there for 13 days working through that. And Carter specifically picked Camp David because Carter felt that would be the one place um, that would bring those two men together. And Carter knew the power of Camp David and how just being isolated, the serenity, the tranquility, the seclusion of Camp David would lead to something, or could lead to something world changing. Um, he doubted it at the end, but when it all shook out, the peace deal was signed and still in effect 40 plus years later.
One thing that shocked me is that, as someone who's read like a billion books on the presidency, there's only one book before yours that is solely on Camp David. What do you think it is about Camp David that didn't lend itself to a full-fledged examination until now?
It's one of those places, and I think this is true for any kind of historical work, is sometimes the best people to write the history have lived it. And the I think the book you're talking about is The Presidents at Camp David by W. Dale Nelson, who was a AP reporter, pool reporter for the White House, and I don't know if he had ever gone into the gates, but he was adjacent to it for many years. Um, it's such a secluded and private place that I think only someone that has been there could know where to look in the records to find some of the information. Um, Even the presidents in their memoirs, the ones that wrote them, don't talk about Camp David as much either. And I think it's because it's such a special private place for them. They're trying to honor that feeling. And so it took a lot of time to find, like, even being there, I would hear stories, but legends are legends, and you can't really throw those out there as truth. And so that took a little bit of work to figure out who was, you know, spinning myths and legends and spinning yarns and what was true. And ironically, I found the big irony in it, talking about like just not a lot of research or books written about Camp David. The Reagans, who were probably the most private people in their use of Camp David of any of the 14 presidents, um, wrote the most extensively about it. And you could get a feel, like kind of a rhythm of what a first family would do at Camp David, both for work or relaxation, from from Nancy and Ronald's from their memoirs. But they would not let many people up. And so the irony of that I got most of the feel for what it would or could write about what a typical weekend would be like. That rhythm comes from the most private of the users of Camp David.
So, talk if you can about your daily life there. I know you can't talk about conversations with the president, but what did you do there as a historian? You mentioned the records and you knowing where to find them. What was your daily role? What did that entail?
Most of my daily role was being the chaplain to the staff that are permanently stationed there. So I would be there for their spiritual welfare, for morale issues, just to help them deal with through life problems, life coaching, which is what I do day to day as a Navy chaplain. The historian part was the what we call the collateral duty, the second job that you get. And so I would give historical tours to people that were invited up, um, both if the president was there and we had guests, or just if it was one of the days where we had some other dignitaries from the military up without, the executive office of the president guests there. And so I would give those tours, would research, I'd hear stories and look through that. Mostly my day consists of taking care of the staff and making sure that they were maintaining their ability to be at the top of their game in case we did have a VIP on the grounds, and work them through problems so that um, they're they could continue to provide the high level of service that one would expect for the president, because everybody at Camp David are handpicked. They're the best of the best. Um, and it's just an amazing thing to work with such a wonderful team, um, that I didn't have to do a lot of life coaching. It was more just making sure that they were still had the tools they needed, that I could provide to provide the world-class service that you would expect for the president.
Was it a non-denominational thing that you did for them? I mean, I assume there were people who weren't necessarily, I assume you're Presbyterian just because of your work with Presbyterian outlets. But if there was another denomination of Christianity or Catholicism, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, what have you, were you able to provide services to anybody who needed them?
So I am only authorized to provide services in the Presbyterian tradition. I provide them in my own faith tradition. However, I'm there to facilitate if someone wants a different faith service. I would work to either connect the service member with somebody off the mountain that they could go talk to that's their faith specific, or would learn about that and help them connect that to their faith group. If we had a guest come up that was from a different faith tradition and wanted to practice that faith while they were visiting Camp David, I would be the one that would arrange for that to happen, either at Camp David or off the mountain, and get them connected, to connect to their spiritual needs, whatever those are. So yes, I would preach every Sunday to the staff in a Presbyterian tradition, but would facilitate any other faith tradition to take care of the staff.
When it comes to the I don't know if the secrecy is the right word because we all know it exists. Were you able to tell people where you worked? I mean, is it that level of security, um, or are you able to, or did you have to kind of hide it because it's this sort of obviously a sensitive area?
I chose to hide it. Um, my wife and I made a conscious decision just to not talk about it as much. And um, so it's a little weird, when the book came out, this is the first time I've been talking about my experience up there, and I left 4 years ago. Um, it, it's just easier that way if people don't know that you're that close, because then you don't have to worry about people trying to cozy up to you for information that you can't give them. Close friends and family members knew, but for the most part, we chose to keep it quiet, just for ease of all the hoopla that might come around that, and especially in today's fractured political world. I wasn't a political appointee, so I was chosen, separate from that. And it didn't matter who the president was. I was serving the office of the president, and that's sometimes hard to explain to people that don't fully understand, the apolitical nature of military service. And so it was just easier for us to keep it quiet.
How did your view of the presidency and of the presidents themselves, Biden and Trump, change by serving the administrations in this way?
As for the presidents themselves, I went in with an open slate, um, not expecting one thing or the other. I did learn, just reading through the history and the memoirs and listening to the stories people that had worked there in the past had said, was what you see on TV and the person that the president is aren't always the same. And I think, um, knowing that helped, and that I could, looking back, I don't judge the personality of the individual in the office based on what I see on TV, because now I've read, memoirs, and I've read things that show how gracious and wonderful they were, regardless of party, regardless of president. And I've learned that they all treated everyone with respect and care and love, for the people that serve them, both at Camp David and also down at the White House. I think you've had uh, Kate Brower on, talking about her book, The Residents, and how, like, warm and inviting and the presidents are to the staff that are there. And I think it's very similar. We're serving the office, and serving the individual tastes of the people that are living, or coming up and visiting. And so, that's what we're focused on. And as you read throughout, um, or talk to the people that have served at Camp David, everybody, regardless of their own political persuasion, when they serve a president, they get attached to that president, that first family, and they become their president. And you'll hear people that have worked at Camp David talk about my president. And if they have two, they say, those are my presidents. And there's a bond there that they're going to protect them, and um, support them no matter what, because it's not about political party when you're working up there.
How did you go about writing this book? What process did you undertake? Did you have notes that you would take in yourself? And how did you find your sources, and how did you sort of approach the construction of all this?
So what my goal was to fit it to make it sound like a walking tour of the grounds because that's what I would do frequently. Um, and as I did those tours at camp, I started to realize I could see the look of wonder and awe on the faces of some of the most important and influential people in the world. And when I realized that the story of Camp David and the history of Camp David was so amazing to these people that have accomplished so much in their life, I realized that this was something that we could share with the world. And I would listen to the stories of people that were repeat visitors because they had some interesting perspective on how Camp David may have changed over 15 to 20 years. I couldn't use all of their stories because I couldn't verify it. I had to, whatever I heard, I had to find open source reporting or open source documents that could back it up. Um, but a lot of what I found, I would go to memoirs that presidents and staff members had written from their time, because that's kind of the thing over the last 40 years is to write your memoir of serving in the administration. And those books would also lead me to look for stuff in the library. And I have to give the staffs of the presidential library a huge amount of credit and thanks because navigating the finding aids and trying to figure out what box something is in would be impossible without the archivists and the people that work at these libraries. You 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 contact the right person, tell them what you're looking for. They give you the finding aids. You go online, you find out what you want, and then you can request to see those aids or to see the documents. A lot of times they'll pull the boxes out, have them waiting for you, or they'll make the copies and send them to you. You know, obviously you have to pay for the cost of the labor, or they'll just say this is where it is online, and you can go find it using these keywords. And so I have to give a lot of credit to the assistance I got from the archivists at the libraries.
In your view, what is the future of Camp David? Things seem permanent, but as we recently saw, the current administration elected to make a change with the physical White House itself. Um, you know, we've seen changes to other public buildings and presidential installations. Some are used more than others, depending on the president. What is the future of it? In your view, how closely guarded should Camp David remain, and how should future presidents not only visit it but preserve it?
My hope is that Camp David will continue to be used as a presidential retreat because it's the only place where they can get away. Even if they don't use it very often, I don't foresee a president getting rid of it. They may not, they may be like Truman and not use it as often. But once a president goes up to Camp David, they realize the importance and the value of that retreat, not just for relaxation, but for a place to bring other world leaders together to change the world, as we've seen. So my hope is that if a president thinks when they come in office they want to get rid of it, at least give it a chance, just like Jimmy Carter did. He took some advice to give it a chance, and he gave it a chance and used it extensively. And I would hope all presidents at least visit it before they make the decision to get rid of it. And if a president does decide to get rid of it, obviously that's their prerogative. Um, I mentioned in the book, I would hope that if for some reason, if it does go away and isn't used, that we could turn it into kind of like a permanent peace retreat center or a place where we can study peace, like a peace foundation or a somewhere where peacemakers can come and learn and uh, share ideas. But I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. I think the Camp David Accords and the legend or the ground shaking event that occurred up there. And I think that's cemented it in the public memory, and even people that will be future presidents, I think just having that legacy there will continue to have it be used for whatever the president decides to use it for in the future.
Talk about the environment itself. Obviously, it's up in these mountains, and you mentioned the thick foliage that's there. What is being done to preserve the area environmentally, and how precious is not only that area, but how did it, amplify your view of preserving our natural habitats and resources, just being there every day?
I would tell friends that I had the one of the most amazing parts of the job was I got to go to work in a national park every day. And the drive to work was just so relaxing. When I turned off of US 15, uh, in Thermont and started heading um, towards the mountain, you have a state park on the left and a national park on the right. Cunningham Falls State Park is on the left. Catoctin National Park or Catoctin Mountain Park is on the right. It's absolutely beautiful. And the the original plan for Camp or what is now Camp David, the Catoctin Mountain Recreation Demonstration Area, the whole area was or what's now Catoctin Mountain Park. Its goal was to preserve nature and to allow people that live in the cities to come into nature, to the rural areas, and appreciate and learn how to hunt, fish, camp, and appreciate the natural beauty that we have in the United States. Um, and I would, I've always been an outdoors fan. Growing up as a Boy Scout, I learned the leave no trace motto, and because there's the state park and the national park that surround what is Camp David, I don't think it's naturally going to be preserved with all the rules that are, there for preserving the land that's within the National Park Service boundaries. Um, and so even if you never get to go to Camp David, just driving around in those parks that surround the facility will give you nothing but peace and tranquility and let you know that we have this amazing natural resource in the United States throughout coast to coast. And to get to preserve that, I would hope we continue to do that, especially in the Appalachian region, which is where Camp David sits.
Did you ever get to take your wife for a visit? Is that allowed?
I did get to bring my wife up there.
Nice,
And
nice.
so on on the weekends, if there are not any guests, when I preach, the family members of the staff members are allowed to come up to visit as well because it's your workspace, so they do get to come up on those occasions.
Hopefully that applies to podcast hosts who what's next for you? Did you like writing a book? I mean, you're, I guess, trained more religiously, but did you find writing enjoyable? And do you think you'd do another book?
I did find it enjoyable. I want to do more books. I've got one that I'm in the final stages of editing that I'll start shopping around soon, and it's a collection of sermons that I preached while I was at Camp David. So all the sermons I preached to the president, and the VIPs are in that book. And hopefully that will provide some context to the faith piece that is definitely not out there for people to learn. They could see exactly how I approached speaking faith matters to the President of the United States and VIPs. And it'll give a taste to what the other chaplains before and after me have done. And then after that, I've got a couple other history books that I'm looking at exploring and writing. Not necessarily centered on Camp David, but it's been an enjoyable experience. Long, frustrating at times, but I'm glad I did it, and hope to keep doing more as time goes on.
Charles Ferguson, the author of Presidential Seclusion, The Power of Camp David, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Evan. It's been a wonderful conversation.
A lot of fun. Check out the book and also his website, which is charlesfergusonbooks.com. He's on the website formerly known as Twitter at cfergusonbooks. Axelbankhistory.com was designed by Nikki Rideout of Ellie Claire Designs. That has our most recent episodes, featured episodes, and also a link to that Patreon page that I mentioned. And I'm about to mention again, check Nikki's work out. The Patreon page is patreon.com/AxelbankHistory. We donate part of your contributions to a charity for children's literacy. And thank you for listening to Axelbank Reports, History and Today, conversations with America's top nonfiction authors and why their books matter right now. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Axelbank History. We update those with clips from the show, guest announcements, and book recommendations. See you next time. Thanks.